Hello, everyone, and welcome to Strategic Economic Research's August webinar, Strategic Storytelling for Renewable Energy Success. My name is Ariel Kaler, and I'm the Sales Analyst and Outreach Manager here at SER, and I will be helping to facilitate today's session. We have a great lineup of speakers for you today, including a Vice President here at SER, Creative Director at Morning Cup Productions, and two incredible leaders at Innovant PR. A couple housekeeping things for you before we get started. First, the Q&A feature has been enabled for this session, so please add your questions as you think of them, and we will be sure to answer them at the end. Second, we are recording this webinar, and we will send it out to everyone who registered when the recording is ready. With that, our first speaker today is Ethan Loomis, Vice President of Sales and Marketing here at SER. Ethan, take it away.
Thanks, Ariel, and thanks everyone for hopping on. Really a pleasure to speak with you about strategic storytelling. So Ariel, you can advance to the next slide. Just a little bit about me. I'm Ethan. I am a videographer with Clean Energy Video, and I am also Vice President of Marketing and Sales for Strategic Economic Research. I have 15 years of videography experience performing videos for events, interviews, motion graphics. I have my degree in visual communication from Illinois State University. I managed the video and social media strategy for a mental health treatment center for 7 years before coming on board with SER. And now within the past year, I've been working to roll out video services under the Clean Energy Video brand, specifically for renewable energy companies. Next slide. So when we talk about strategic storytelling, I want you to think about one of your favorite movies or TV shows or books. Maybe it's something that you watched recently, or maybe it's a childhood favorite. What makes that story compelling? Most likely, it is the characters behind the story that drive that story forward. They're the ones that you relate to and empathize with, and they stand out in your memory because they change over time. They experience struggle and conflict, and over time they're changed and overcome that struggle. That is the foundation of a good story. It all starts with the characters. Next slide. Storytelling matters in marketing and communications because people really connect with other people. Humans connect with other humans more so than they connect with just brands or companies. Stories that revolve around human struggle and conflict resonate with us deeply because life isn't perfect. And so someone going through some type of conflict and struggle and coming out of that resonates with us on a deep level as humans. And what I've seen work really well on social media isn't necessarily polished, perfect products or services, but instead authenticity, authentic people leaning into their personalities. Diving into someone's real struggle creates empathy and allows us to connect with others on a human level. And stories really do pull us into someone else's world, and they help us put ourselves in their shoes, which ultimately builds trust. And a great example of this is Nike's partnership with Michael Jordan. The Air Jordan brand wasn't just about shoes. It embodied Jordan's story, which made it so powerful. And I've got this quote here at the bottom about facts and stories and how you really need to pair the facts that you want to communicate with an overall story. Research shows that facts are 22 times more likely to be remembered if they are part of a story. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. You can go to the next slide, Ariel. As communicators, we have to decide what stories to tell. And ideally, those stories will align with company goals, but they also need to resonate with your audience. This means knowing who your audience is and what resonates with them, what they find interesting. And often the stories that resonate with your audience are the same ones that resonate with you. So you need to find out, what are you passionate about? And if you're passionate about the story that you're telling, your audience will be able to sense that. Another important consideration is the medium. How will that shape how you tell your story? Are you telling this story on YouTube, LinkedIn, your website, or maybe during a live event. Think about the format, whether you're doing a long form podcast format and then you break it up into different social media clips. You need to maximize the return on a single piece of content by repurposing it. At SER, we are focused on pairing facts with stories. For example, we can state the fact that solar projects create economic benefits for local communities. But unless we add a story, like interviewing local construction workers on site or the O&M techs that are working a solar or wind project day to day, or maybe we're interviewing local school superintendents when a wind project has been in a community for 15 years, is well established, and that property tax revenue is going primarily to local schools, also to the fire department, to the county fund. Those are real people that are benefiting from that money coming in. And so interviewing those people and finding out what that impact is, that way you can tell the facts that you want to communicate about your service or product through a story. And just real quick, an example here on repurposing content. I put an image here of Jerry Santos from Asiona. I've worked with him in the past. And, we did a video interview with a local landowner at a wind farm, and I got a lot of video content. And just kind of by chance, I captured one split-second frame of Jerry here. He wasn't really supposed to be too much a part of the video, but I did capture this image, and he repurposed that content, used it for social media, had a few paragraphs about his time chatting with the landowners. And so just a great example of using one opportunity, maximizing that, and repurposing and reposting with several pieces of content over time. Next slide. So one of my biggest inspirations in terms of just content creation and thinking about storytelling is Gary Vee. And 8 years ago, I watched one of his videos that he created called Document, Don't Create. And his message was that marketers often get paralyzed trying to create content from scratch, when instead we should document the real stories that are already happening all around us. And this was really a mindset shift for me. His advice was very simple, and it was really just get started. Don't wait for everything to be perfect. Concerns about quality and polish can really hold you back from getting started. So just get started, and you will get better with time. Highly recommend you check out that video at a later time. It's called Document, Don't Create. It's very inspirational. Next slide. Okay, so just from my experience on social media, a few lessons have stood out over time. I see a lot of developers posting B-roll footage, maybe drone footage of your technology, and while that's great to highlight just some of these massive projects and very impressive, a lot of work went into them, and I'm sure you want to highlight the size, scale, scope of the work that's been put in. But without that human element, without that human story behind it, sometimes those videos can get quite stale. And so I would just encourage folks in the renewable energy industry to dive into the humans that are behind those projects and really trying to tell those human stories. If you're doing video content, you absolutely need to be including captions. Many people are, scrolling without the sound on. And so include captions in your video, just a very tangible tip here. Keep doing what works. So look at your metrics, find the content that resonates with your followers, your audience, and keep doing more of that. If you see a piece of content that is rising above the rest, dive into why that is working so well and follow on the same track. And then in terms of video, your hook, your first 3 seconds of your video is going to be super crucial, especially on social media. Like any good presentation or speech, you need to come out strong and hit them hard right out of the gate. And so that is going to be so critical in order to capture attention. Next slide. Okay, so just a little bit about me and my services. So again, I am a videographer in the clean energy space. I'm really passionate about filming, crafting narratives. I've produced landowner testimonials, employee highlights. film some ribbon cutting events. And if you are a renewable energy developer, you work for a company developing these types of projects, I would love to speak with you more about the services that I can provide and really focusing on crafting a narrative, not just capturing the event itself and creating a nice highlight, but also targeting what message you want to tell through that video and what message or story you want to communicate. So that's a little bit about me. I will pass it off to another amazing individual doing some really creative video work, Luke.
Hey, thanks, Ethan. Thanks everyone for joining the webinar. I'm excited to be here and excited to talk about videos. That's what I do. That's what I'm passionate about. So I'm Luke Shauf. I'm a creative director with Morning Cup Productions. We're based out of the best city in the world, Peterborough, Ontario, Canada. You've definitely heard of it, just outside of Toronto. And yeah, been doing video for a number of years and then been focusing on advertising for a number of years. And then just like these last couple of years, been focusing primarily on the renewable energy industry. I think that there's a ton of potential for brands in the renewable industry to harvest the lessons that have been learned through the advertising industry and implement them into the renewable space. And so that's kind of like the bet that I'm making, that there's great opportunity within advertising within the industry, and the brands that kind of adopt creative advertising will have an unfair advantage for the first number of years. So today I'm kind of going to go over the kind of foundational strategy of how we at Morning Cup Productions develop our stories, and kind of like the baseline reason why we exist, or the problem we solve. So if we can go to the first slide there, Ariel. It all kind of starts with the 95 to 5 rule. A few years ago, there was a strategy done at the Ehrenberg Bass Institute looking into on average, how many buyers are currently in market and how many buyers are currently out of market. And the researchers themselves were kind of surprised to see this number of that on average across multiple industries, there's only about 5% of potential buyers that are currently in market, and there's 95% of buyers who are currently out of market. People who aren't Googling your brands right now, aren't in buy mode, not even worried about kind of like the problem that they're eventually going to have. And so a lot of current marketing focuses on activating the sale of the people who are searching on Google, the people who are currently looking to buy. And when all of our marketing is focused on just that 5%, man, we're missing out on engaging with 95% of our potential clients who are just being unreached. And if we go to the next slide, we go to the next rule, which is called the day one rule. And you can see the kind of consequence of not engaging the 95% of future buyers. If you can see in this graphic here, 86% of B2B buyers start with a day one list of brands in mind. And on average, there's 3 brands on that list. And 92% of the time, they choose one of those brands from that day one list. So if you're on that day one list, that's a massive, 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 massive advantage. If you're not on the list, that's a massive, massive, massive disadvantage. You're left competing over the crumbs that exist out of the people that don't have a day one list. So what we want to do at Morning Cup Productions, and what we want to use, how we want to use stories strategically, is to help brands get on that day one list. We do that by engaging the 95% and creating brand memory association, so that when they come into buy mode, they remember your brand, they write you down on your list, and you have that much more of a competitive advantage and better opportunity to make a sale. So if you go to the next slide, there's multiple ways to build brand memories. Like going to RE Plus in a couple weeks here is a good way to have a booth and people walk by it and to engage people. Those are good ways. Story and video is an especially effective way in which to build brand memory associations that's not necessarily being taken full advantage of in the research I've done into the industry right now. Like Ethan was saying, he had that one fact where facts delivered within a story is, you're 22 more times likely to be remembered. And that's exactly what story does. It creates a more easy, it creates a memory that's easier to recall. And that's what we're trying to do with story. And One way in which we're trying to do that, on the next slide, we'll see here a graph, is we're trying to use emotion to build memory. There's this kind of common misconception within B2B industries, and you can see it in the renewable energy space too, that while it's primarily EPCs that are making the buying decisions, or it's developers, or it's these businesses and big C-level suites that are making these decisions, that they're going to be reasonable, that they're going to be rational, and that they're going to make the best choice possible. And what we know from a lot of studies into buying behaviors is that people are people are people, and people are silly, people are irrational, and people aren't always going to make the best decision for themselves. And people are guided by their emotions, even within a business context, even within an engineering context. People are going to be influenced by their emotions, oftentimes more than they're going to be influenced by the most reasonable decision. And so if we're just using all our marketing as saying like, hey, look at our product is better than this competitor's product, our service is better than this service, people aren't necessarily going to be compelled simply by reason and fact alone. That data will get filtered out. What we want to do is create an emotional connection that will build memory. And because why, on the next slide, we'll see people take shortcuts. People, even in buying decisions, people will take shortcuts. And you can see there's a classic ad from IBM back in the 80s, I think, or 70s, I can't quite recall, but you might recall it, where IBM had this legendary kind of campaign around how nobody ever got fired for buying IBM. And what they're doing, they're telling a story there, but they're making an emotional connection that you can be safe in your job as the IT person. You will not get fired. You can trust us. We're reliable. And it offers people a shortcut to take as to like, oh, okay, I know I can go with them and I'm going to be safe. There's no risk involved. And so people will often fall back on shortcuts when they're making decisions. And when we build those brand memory associations, oftentimes people fall back to the most familiar brand. And so if we go to the next slide, you can see as well the effect that emotion has in storytelling. When you make an emotional connection with somebody, you can see that it also, like, emotion plus fluency plus time equals profit. And you can see the numbers there are pretty staggering, come from campaigns that were hundreds of thousands of campaigns that were studied. The campaigns that have emotion within them and create an emotional response within the viewer have a much better return and perform way better from a campaign perspective. So if we move on to the next slide, if I were to leave you with kind of 3 tips around storytelling and using it strategically, is number 1, like I've been saying here over and over again, make it emotional so that it's memorable. People are going to remember the memories that are in their body. When we can bring in how people feel into it, they're going to have a much better opportunity to remember you. Number 2, make it consistent. People don't just see one thing in the world and then remember it for the rest of our lives. Our memories are tricky places. They're very unreliable. They need a lot of repetition. We need to see things a number of times before it ever gets into our brain. And the number 3, and this one is huge, I think, especially within the renewable industry, from what I've seen, is make it distinctive so that it's easy to recall. If you are telling the same story as your competitors and you're all using the same types of videos, or you're telling all the same types of stories, or you're all using the same catchphrases of superior or quality or trusted, it's going to be hard for the buyer to remember you in distinction from your competitors. So we want to have distinctive, unique stories, distinctive, unique brand assets that help us to be more memorable and help us to easier recall. So those 3 tips, basically make it emotional, make it consistent, make it distinctive. And then to wrap up with the last slide, I really believe that strategically telling story in an emotional way with this and engaging the 95% of buyers is your unfair advantage. In a world of irrational buyers, telling a story is your advantage, and we really want to get you on that day 1 list and give you a better opportunity to to make the sale and to make more sales and to grow your company. So thank you everyone for listening. With that, I'm going to toss it over to Ali.
Ali.
All right, I'm off mute now. Hey guys, I'm Ali Koppel. I'm a partner at Innovant PR. Been in the renewable energy industry for 15 years. I actually started out in development, and now I lead Innovant's corporate communications practice. So I like to say I'm like the comms director for half a dozen renewable energy IPPs. So I'm here to talk about the role of visual communications, the role that visual communications plays in your overall communications and marketing strategy. So a lot of us on the call are renewable energy comms professionals. So my goal really is to provide practical advice about how to think about visuals that you can start using immediately. So what I'll go through today is number one, what is visual storytelling and why does it matter for renewable energy companies? Two, I'll talk about how do we capture the best images and videos on a limited budget. And then finally, I'll go through some fun details and considerations. Okay, so let's get into it. Next slide. What do we mean when we talk about visual storytelling? This is the images, the graphics, and the videos that communicate your company's story, values, and messages. For renewable energy companies, your ability to tell your story with images and videos is essential. As Luke said, this is a crowded space. We want to differentiate, and we'll talk more about that. But first, where do your visuals show up? Your visuals show up on your corporate and project websites. Do you, and just sort of, how you see this is like, do I pull up your website and do I see stock images of employees that don't work at your company? Or do I pull up your website and see actual projects that you've built with employees, with your actual employees? Makes a big impact. We also see it on project materials. We also use the visuals on social media. We use the visuals on in investor meetings and in office decor to really help engage your employees in the mission. And we also use it on an earned media. So, we collect all these really great videos and photos from an event or, as a part of a, media package around a big announcement. We can send those to local media, regional, state media, even trade press and tier one. And oftentimes media will use the images you submit in their stories. So that's sort of the use cases. Now let's talk about the value of visual storytelling. It's integral to your individual brand and people's perception of the renewable energy industry. Here's why. Number one, as Luke hit on, it differentiates your company. It's a crowded space here in the US. You want to videos help you quickly tell your story, how you're different. Do you develop energy storage? Okay, let's pull up if I pull up your website, will the hero image feature energy storage or, will it feature something else? It's a quick way to communicate. If you're an experienced energy storage developer, if your hero video on your homepage has energy storage. Next up, it creates memorable connections with key audiences. So we know really well who our key audiences are. We share our key audiences of rural landowners and communities, customers, capital markets and banks, prospective employees. We know our audiences really well. And we want to create memorable connections with them. Not all of our key audiences can attend, our really great employee offsite where we all feel revved up about our business. Not everyone can attend, our groundbreakings or our ribbon cuttings where we get really excited about the work that we're doing and we see the impact on the local stakeholders. Videos and images help tell that story to our key audiences and bring the feeling that we have at those events to them. And then next up, videos show credibility. We talked a lot about, on websites, what you pull up, it really matters to really help convey, you have real employees, you're an established company. And then finally, speed to understanding. So visuals really help with speed to understanding of what you do. So think about, an investor meeting. I can say, I can tell, prospective investors, we have 1 gigawatt of projects under management, or I can show a video, of all, 15 projects that we have, under management, and convey that message in an emotional, much more impactful way. Okay, so now for the fun part. I'm going to show an example of a video testimonial that Ethan and I actually collaborated together on in Illinois. So while we're watching this video, I want you to pay attention to the visuals and how the video makes you feel about the developer. Then we'll spend the rest of the time sort of dissecting how we got here. So you can play the video now.
3, 2, 1.
I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to the Dowson's family, one of the foremost entrepreneurs in our community who have demonstrated once again their foresightedness in developing a great new project for this community. I want to say thank you to Swift Current, who appeared on the scene 5 or 6 years ago, made a lot of promises, and made good on every promise they made to us.
All right, cool. So what did you notice? Off the bat, this is a testimonial. Someone else saying that you live up to your values is far more impactful than simply listing your values on your website. Next up, I wonder if you guys noticed all of the visuals that we had throughout the event that showed up on the video. Having consistent logo usage, consistent visuals, really shows a high level of sophistication. And that's really important with audiences, with our key audiences. All right, so next up, we're going to go to the next slide, and we're going to talk about, how do we sort of work back from that? How do we get to that moment and get to those visuals? So at Innovant, we actually get most of our collateral for our clients at groundbreaking events or at ribbon cutting events. In fact, capturing these visuals, these videos, these photos is a key reason that we do events. The number one reason is that, with events, you have a quorum of project stakeholders all in one place. You also have the branded collateral, right? The branded ribbon, the podium sign, the poster boards that really help show a high level of sophistication in your operation. And then third is a more practical reason. There's momentum around these milestones, around groundbreakings, project financing groundbreakings, and then the ribbon cutting COD. And what that means is that there's also, there tends to be money in the budget for videography and photography. Okay, so how do we make the most, and we can stay on this slide, how do we make the most of a limited budget and ensure you get what you need, not just for the short-term announcement, not just for your press release and your, initial social post, but you get what you need in the long term for your communication strategy over the next 6 to 12 months. So here's some considerations. Think about your project needs. Do you have another project in the state where it'd be really helpful to get, imagery of or a testimonial video to show, another county commissioner? Would it be helpful to get, on the ground shots of your energy storage facility to show other people in the state what it looks like, and that, with similar vegetation? So think about your project needs. Also think about your corporate needs. Are you going to do a website rebrand? Are you focusing more on storage now? So you got to get more, photos and videos of storage. So you really want to make sure are you going to do employee testimonials? Is that in your social media plan? Do you want to make sure to capture pictures, individual pictures of employees at that event? So really thinking through, what you've got going on in the next 6 to 12 months, so you can make the most of your videography and photography budget. All right, so next up is our last slide, and we're going to go through, again, like how do we before this slide, sorry. Perfect. We're going to end on just talking about some nuts and bolts of how we keep everything organized, some additional considerations. First up is shot list. So this is how we keep everything organized, and it's how we communicate with Ethan and our, videographers, photographers, and really make sure that we get what we need out of the shoot. And then, another sort of, what we'll also have to coordinate on is, proper timing. Events can be extremely, they're scheduled down to the minute. And so in order to make sure we get the testimonials, we get, the collateral that you need, we have to really work with the videographer and photographer to think through the schedule. And oftentimes that'll mean, budgeting for 2 days, or budgeting for a really early, really late day. Timing is essential. And then you also want to think about prepping your stakeholders. Some people need a ton of preparation, like maybe your landowner has never been, video recorded. They may want the questions in advance and to talk through it with you. And then maybe you need to get, somebody, like somebody from the company on screen and they don't feel comfortable. It is helpful to role play with them as well in advance. Some stakeholders don't need a lot of prep, like county commissioners. They're used to being interviewed on camera. So think about that. And then also think about your signage and branding. Again, it's just really important to show that level of sophistication with your brand throughout your photography and videography. And here's a pro tip. If you're doing an event, make sure you've got a really great podium sign, because that will really just make the visual. And I see Ethan nodding, so he agrees. And then finally, this is another pro tip. Think earlier rather than later about creating a video guide for your company, a corporate video guide. So this is something that, like your brand guide, a video guide will set the standard for all of the videos that you create. So if you work with a photographer in Illinois, but you work with a different photographer in, Arizona, you will be able to make sure everything is standardized across your company and looks, again, more sophisticated. All right, cool. Well, appreciate the time with you guys. And now I'm going to turn it over to Erin, the president of Innovant, to talk about project comms.
Hi guys, I'm Erin. As Ali said, I'm the president of Innovant. And my role here, I work on the project side of things. So I work directly with project development teams to figure out how to grow support and satisfy the public interest element of the permits they're seeking for their specific projects. I'm a recovering regulatory attorney, so I bring that kind of strategic angle to the projects that I work on. And so I'm going to kind of talk mostly for developers here. I'm going to talk about strategic storytelling for projects. Strategic storytelling really turns abstract projects into stories that matter to real people in real places. And you kind of have to think of it as one element of a broader outreach effort. It complements transparency, it complements following through on commitments. All of those things support your narrative. The illustrations and imagery you use are very important. Third-party validators you leverage, and your follow-up actions, they're all part of the story and determine your success. So I guess think about it, the more that people can relate to and feel involved in your story, the more they're going to connect with your project. So storytelling starts with the development process. It starts when you choose a project name. Find a way to tie it to the project area. Oops, sorry, next slide, Ariel, that's my bad. Think about incorporating local elements into your project logo. Use local imagery on your website and on your materials. So this slide has some examples of project-specific logos that we've created for clients, where we really talk to them about what the project area is like, and then we do our own research and really kind of weave in those local elements. Because when you're building a narrative, you want to connect to people's sense of place. And so tying the logo and the project name to the area can help with that. And then for projects, the ultimate end goal of successful strategic storytelling is community acceptance. And I'm going to take a quick step backwards. So why does community acceptance matter? Well, next slide. Renewable energy has become politicized, and politics are polarizing. So before people in a community can even learn how your project can benefit them, they've formed an opinion, and it's probably a negative one. So public outcry over renewable energy projects increased 32% last year, and that increases the likelihood of delaying approval, making the project reduce its size footprint, and achieving its cancellation. And these things cost a lot more time and money in the development than deploying a robust community engagement plan early in development, because we are past the point of hoping for the best regarding opposition. So we like to say, in order to build large-scale infrastructure projects, you need to earn and maintain a social license. That means you need to earn acceptance among stakeholders, and that's directly related to the level of trust that you possess. So strategic storytelling and transparency go hand in hand. They're critical path because they have the power to humanize you and earn you and your project community buy-in. Next slide. So I'm going to walk through a couple key elements on how to shape your narrative in a way that makes your project feel relevant, responsible, and beneficial to the community. So the first element is to make sure that your messaging is tailored to be relevant to the host community. Hint, climate change is not relevant to those who don't believe in it. So because climate change has also been super politicized, we need to figure out how to talk about projects in a way that avoids pushing global warming to the forefront of the debate. So instead, pause and reframe. Clean energy is affordable in the face of growing demand and skyrocketing electric bills. It promotes energy security. It complements other sources of electricity and enhances reliability. So, I mean, struggling to pay your power bill, that's nonpartisan. Keeping the lights on, that's nonpartisan. When we talk about clean energy in terms of savings and resilience, people can really connect to it. So tie your messaging into what the community values. Make your messaging think what matters to them and what do they need to hear. The second element here under tailoring your message is using faces and voices. And all three other speakers have touched on this, but sharing quotes and photos from individuals who are involved in or benefiting from your project or other projects that you've built, that resonates so much more than just hearing about it from you. So testimonials are a really great way for showcasing this, real people experiencing real benefits. A farmer, a union leader, a teacher, a local business owner, more credible than you are when it comes to talking about how your projects benefit the community. Next slide. So we all know economic benefits are great. Tax dollars, jobs, economic ripple effect. But in order to really let those resonate, you have to use real numbers, not vague promises. And so an economic impact report is really great for this, because then you can see that breakdown and go to the and say, your school district is going to get $1 million a year. That's so much more tangible than millions of dollars over the project's operational life, and people can visualize it much more easily. And then if you can, contextualize those numbers further. That new money will allow the school to hire a new teacher or buy that new school bus that they've been needing without increasing the tax burden on residents. And so those economic benefits are great, but let's think about how to supplement those further. So infrastructure improvements. The road use agreement is going to make sure that we improve your roads and leave them in a better condition than we found them. Your project could include or enable broadband expansion, grid reliability benefits. And so that's another element that you can bring to the table. But one that I'm really starting to see happen a lot is a community benefits agreement. So these are structured and allow the community to define what matters to them. And this gives you a win. You give a win to the community above and beyond the standard tax benefits. So when a community feels like they have a say in how it benefits them, their ownership in your project grows. Next slide, please. So the third element in strategic storytelling is to prioritize transparency. This is critical. One of the most frequently stated reasons for project opposition is the lack of community engagement. So I like to say early and often, engage more than the bare minimum, so that it comes across that you're being transparent and so how do you do this? Foster an open process. Explain how decisions are made and where people can weigh in. Build a project website, a robust project website that has project details, FAQs, several avenues to connect project representatives, and then outline the milestones for public input in permit proceedings. Embrace clarity and simplicity in your messaging. I know that we're all wonky nerds who speak in industry jargon and acronyms, but that's not digestible to the common person. So make your technical information digestible Leave the acronyms and industry jargon behind. Help people understand the project by speaking in their language. Highlight your past track record. So have readily available examples of where you've delivered on commitments or mitigated issues elsewhere. Testimonials are also great for this. You really want to position yourself as a partner who listens, adapts, and fixes problems. And then encourage local participation. Communities are going to be involved in your project, whether you not want them to be or not. So inviting ownership and creating that two-way dialogue early in the process lets them know that you're embracing their input. So you could form a local advisory board. You could open a field office. You could hold office hours monthly or whatever cadence makes the most sense for your schedule. Create community benefits committees. Really find ways to involve the community so that they feel ownership of your project, because people want to have a say in changes that are happening to their community. And then the last element to strategic storytelling, next slide, please, is to address concerns head on. And so think Gavin Newsom's Twitter antics, but less snarky and fewer shouty caps. So we can no longer afford as developers to be reactive. We can't just sit around and, as misinformation comes up, we're like, no, that's not true. Here, look at this. It's much easier to prevent fires than it is to put them out. So show that you understand these needs and concerns up front. Acknowledge the local history, the land use, local traditions before you start discussing change. You want to demonstrate that you've been paying attention before you start persuading the community to accept this project. How do you do this? Clearly communicate what you're doing, how the technology works, and this is something that I think that we need to do a much better job of as an industry. But acknowledge what kind of truth the opposition might deploy up front. This shows the stakeholders that they matter, that you respect them, and it takes the wind out of the opposition's sails. Rural communities have very strong ties to their land, and if they don't feel like concerns are being heard, they're not going to listen to you. So how can you do this? Anticipate hot button issues. We all know what the misinformation topics are that come up time and time again in different project areas. Bring it to the forefront of the conversation. You might be wondering about noise. Here's what you can expect, and here's how it compares to everyday sounds that you already know. Provide evidence and context. I think that this one is very important because there are credible studies that dispel almost every misinformation topic that opponents rely on to sow fear and distrust about these technologies. So take the time to develop a comprehensive list of FAQ that have very clear, simple responses, but are well cited. Compile a resource database that houses the latest studies that support your FAQs, and then give them to decision makers upfront. Give them that information so that they can educate themselves and be prepared to respond to constituent questions. And the last part of this one is to anticipate mitigation measures. Be prepared to answer how you're going to minimize impacts when the first conversations happen. So, did a previous developer come through and do a really bad job with drainage tiles? Know that going in and come equipped with an answer of how you're going to be different and how you're going to prevent that from happening. And so those are the four main elements of strategic storytelling for projects. And I just want to end with this. Storytelling isn't just one meeting, it's a series of touch points. So keep the narrative alive through social media updates, newsletters, attend meetings, attend local events, and form long-term partnerships, and let them know that you're available, you're there to answer your questions, and you want them involved in the project. And that's it.
Great. Thank you to all of our speakers. We are going to enter into a Q&A session now, so please drop your questions in the Q&A feature. As a reminder, this presentation has been recorded, so we will send it out at the end. So one of the first questions that we have is, I've heard other industry leaders say to not go toe-to-toe with trying to correct everyone of an opposition's group and their claims. So how do we balance that perspective with trying to address these concerns head on?
Yeah, I'm sure that this seems to align with what you were talking about, Aaron, but I think there are lots of people in the room that are listening, and I don't think that you can necessarily convince that opposition group or sway those individuals that are asking the questions. They're usually asking the questions and not wanting to listen to the answer. But the other folks in the room may think, oh, well, that is a concern that I hadn't thought of before, or I'd like to hear how the developer answers it. So I think there is a certain level of trying to address certain concerns. Obviously, it matters. It depends on what that concern is, but being short to the point, providing just factual evidence that would reassure folks that are concerned about maybe a piece of misinformation that's out there. I think can be done in a strategic way that will hopefully sway not the person necessarily asking you the question, but other folks in the room listening. But Aaron, do you have other thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think that's right. So you have your, we'll call it the 1080. 10% of people in the community support you. 10% are going to be opposed to you no matter what. Those are not your audiences. Your audience is the 80 in the middle who maybe haven't thought about it, or they don't live quite near the project, but their voice could be important in your regulatory proceeding. Those are the people that you're really speaking to. And I've had actually town board members, county commissioners say, well, you know, the opposition group dropped off 2,000 pages of stuff they printed from the internet, and I don't know how to respond to it. And so in response, we compiled a binder of studies and delivered it to the decision makers. And that was very helpful for them. And so the misinformation's out there. We're behind the eight ball as an industry in combating it. And so that's why I'm finding that it's more successful to lead with, hey, you might wonder about property values. Here's what the studies show. And we can't be worried anymore about putting something into someone's mind because it's already there. If they log onto Facebook or Google wind solar storage, it's out there. That's the first thing they're going to find. So it's already there. So we're just playing ball right away.
Our next question is about data centers. Where data centers are either in place or planned in a geographical area, how can we best counter arguments of where and why more power is needed for the grid? Some people believe it's just for the Googles.
I mean, data centers and AI are definitely a reason that the power needs are growing, but so is population shifts, population growth, electrification of things. All of these are reasons that we need more homegrown electricity. And so, you know, battery storage is great because it can store energy when it's cheap during the day and deploy it when everyone gets home from work and turns their lights on and starts the dishwasher and starts a little laundry. And that kind of evens out the grid and keeps it reliable and resilient. And so, yes, data centers are a reason, but that's not the only reason. The need for electricity has been increasing for the past couple years. And so I don't know if that was helpful.
Yeah.
Robert.
Another question is, how do we determine if our storytelling strategy has been successful?
Yeah,
Oh, you go for it, Ethan.
yeah, I could touch on that a bit, and then if you want to follow up, I think there's some quantitative ways and some qualitative ways that you can take a look and see what's working. Quantitative would be just looking at the numbers. If you're using your video on social media or on YouTube, just look at how many people are watching it. Is this content that people are paying attention to? You know, there's metrics on YouTube where you can see how long are people watching? Where did you lose them? Maybe trying to find what the sweet spot is for the length of your video. Is 3 minutes just way too long? You needed to shorten it down into some 30-second clips. So take a look at the metrics, see what's working, and then continue to optimize over time. The more qualitative would be kind of the feedback that you get if you've got folks that are telling you, "Hey, I love that video that you posted," or if they're commenting and engaging with your content. Um, Someone is going out of their way to say, "Hey, I saw this piece of content that you put out." There's a good chunk of people that aren't necessarily engaging with your content, but they're still paying attention and it's still resonating with them. They may not go out of their way to communicate that to you. So the fact that you do receive some of those comments, would say that's a really good indicator, and you can take that with a grain of salt of like, there's a lot of other folks that are paying attention that may not necessarily engage. But Aaron, did you have some other thoughts on that, or Luke?
I mean, I think in terms of product development, you know that that strategic storytelling is working, because people want to continue the conversation and they don't just shut you down right away.
Mm.
That means you have hooked them. They're interested in learning more. That's what I would say. And you know, ideally you see your supporter base growing, but it's really the middle people who might be moving closer to support. Continuing the conversation allows that to happen.
Great. We have two really specific questions that I think are really great. The first one is, fire safety with ESS systems is a large concern for communities. Partnering with fire professionals is a good way to gain trust. Any other tips?
I think maybe they mean BESS. That's the acronym
Oh,
I'm familiar with. So battery energy storage systems, and this has been a big thing this summer. I think there was some news that came out in the spring. I can't remember the name of the specific project in California, but it was actually a battery storage project inside a warehouse, and so not quite the same technology that's being deployed pretty prominently here across the US. And so I think digging into people's specific concerns, maybe they've read news articles about fires, and trying to find out what specific situation they're concerned about, and maybe trying to point out the differences between the technology that's being deployed versus what's been in the news recently. But yeah, that would be my thoughts.
And also, statistics are on our side now, right? In the last 10 years, I think there's been, and I could be off by one or two either way, 26 incidents in 10 years, which is much lower than, you know, cars, airplanes, stuff like that. And so I think developing a robust list of FAQs, differentiating why the technology that you're using might be different. You know, lithium ion versus, what was it, nickel, cobalt or something at Moss Landing. You know, pointing out the disparities. And again, you know, if you can partner with ESRG or another one of those groups who can stand there and say, I would literally let my grandma stand 200 feet away from a smoking battery, like that puts that super into perspective.
Good answers. The next one is about wind projects. I can address most any concern except that the turbines are too big and you can see them. Any ideas to address this concern?
This is where you put on your empathetic hat and remember that change is harder for people in rural communities than it is for us who live in cities. And so before jumping right into an explanation of why it's fine, you won't, you know, after a while you won't notice it. It's acknowledging and empathizing, like, I know this is going to be a big change. And then what we like to say, Allie and I, when we do media trainings, is that it's an answer, transition, message. So it's a quick answer, you transition, and then you go into your talking point message that you might want to get across. And kind of, there's not really a good answer. I don't know if anyone else on the panel has a good answer for like countering them. Yeah, you're going to see the wind turbine, but empathizing with them, acknowledging their fear buys you more credibility because you don't just counter it right away.
I saw a great campaign just launched a couple weeks ago from a company in, I think, Sweden called Vattenfall. And they did an ad with Samuel L. Jackson, talking about wind farms and like offshore wind farms, but he's sitting there and talking about like all the benefits of, and they're selling seaweed chips as part of the campaign as well. So they're talking about like all the benefits that it has to marine life and the ocean and everything. And then Samuel L. Jackson is famous for using the curse word, the mother effer word, a lot. So it's like, what if we went from mother effing wind farms to mother effing wind farms? I think like there's also an opportunity in, like you're saying earlier, Aaron, in that preventative measure and that like before anything happens measure, using obviously it's using a famous person who's fairly respected and beloved across the world or whatnot, but then using emotion to and story to kind of like deliver that fact in a unique way. And there's a great quote from G.K. Chesterton, which says, humor slips into the door while all other emotions are waiting for the door to open, kind of deal. So I'd encourage you to check out that campaign. Not that that is the only thing that would ever need to be done, is just making a joke out of everything, but there is like opportunity there to just be funny too, or for advertising, make a difference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is a really relevant question. I was talking with a landowner during this video interview that I did last month, and he's got 7 turbines on his land, and he signed up for this, right? But other neighbors maybe didn't sign up for it, don't have them on their land, and they were hesitant about the wind project coming into their community for this reason of, well, we're going to have to look at it. And I think part of his message was you will get used to it over time, and not that you'll become blind to it eventually, but it'll just kind of become part of your view shed, and you do get used to it. That may not be the most reassuring thing to folks when you're proposing a wind project coming in, but I think just because you can see it isn't necessarily a negative thing. What his main message was, when those property tax dollars started coming in and their community really started to benefit over many years, they grew to enjoy it. These were people that were hesitant about it and having to look at it, but when they understood the massive benefit to the community, then they got on board with it.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing, Ethan. Thank you. One last question is, how do we get buy-in from decision makers from our companies whenever we want to invest more money in our marketing strategies? In videography specifically, things like that.
You're on mute.
It is a big investment to get really quality videography and photography of your sites and your people. And we've had the most success, as I was saying before, of really looking at your major project milestones, and trying to sort of align your videography and photography around that, because you'll have all the right people in one place, and there's a lot of momentum around those company wide. And then also looking at communicating with your executive team about how you can continue to leverage the collateral with projects and with other corporate needs. So it's not just a moment in time that you're going to put on a shelf after you get that collateral, but it's something that you're going to continue to use. And I think Luke, maybe you or Ethan said this, but sort of you have data too, right, of how your past collateral has performed. You can show your executives that. You can also look at your competitors and sort of see really what the best what they're doing, and how well their collateral has played, especially when it has really strong visuals connected with it.
Great. Thank you, Allie. Well, with that, it is time for our webinar to come to an end. So thank you to our speakers for sharing your expertise. We really appreciate it. Again, this webinar was recorded and will be shared with everyone who registered. As an announcement, our next webinar will be Tuesday, September 16th at 11 a.m. Central Time. More information to come in your inbox, and we cannot wait to see you there. Everyone have a great day.